afford you an opportunity to give public comments. Otherwise, as for general rules, applicant has 30 minutes for the presentation. Of course, we're going to start off with the staff presentation. Then applicant has 30 minutes, 5-minute limit for any public comments, and then applicant has a 15-minute rebuttal if they so choose. Of course, everybody giving testimony directed towards me and not anyone else in the room, please. So with that, tonight's matter, we have one hearing. It is for Zone 23-0004, Wendland, and we have Vlad Finkel here for the county. Take it away, sir.
Good evening. For the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. This is a request to rezone a 6.2 acre parcel of land owned by Mr. Wendland, case number ZON 23-0004. The subject property is located at the intersection of Highway 54 and Highway 41 on the southeast corner. As you can see, the property is heavily vegetated. I did look at some most recent aerial photos, and it looks like some of the vegetation, some of the trees were cleared in the southern portion of the property. Highway 41 is abutting the property on the west side of the property line, and Highway 54 on the north side of the property line. The parcel is split zone, commercial and restricted residential. A small portion of the property, I would say approximately 1.5 acres or so maybe, is zoned commercial at this time. We don't have a good number of the amount of property that's been rezoned to commercial, but the remainder of that is zone restricted residential. The parcels to the east and south and to the southwest are all zoned restricted residential. You have rural further east. You have commercial to the west on the west side of Highway 41 right-of-way, as well as City of Spirit Lake north of Highway 54. Based on staff research, it was I was a bit curious why only a portion of the subject property was rezoned to commercial versus the entire parcel. Based on the research, we determined that the parcel had a different parcel line configuration, and it straddled Highway 54. And then in the early 70s, it was rezoned to commercial. As you can see, at that time, a majority of the property to the north of the subject site in close proximity to Highway 54 and 41 was still within the county. Of course, over the course of last 50 years, through progression of development and population growth, that area has been annexed into the city limits. The subject property is located within the border comprehensive plan designation. It is located within the area of city impact for the City of Spirit Lake. These are some of the photos of the property in question. The applicant submitted photos taken from both state highways. As you can see, a majority of the property is fairly level, although there's some minor slope on site. It's fairly insignificant. There is significant amount of vegetation that, if the property is rezoned to commercial, some of that could be utilized towards the commercial landscaping standards in the commercial zone. Here are some more photos. By the way, I wanted to mention that the property on the west side of Highway 41 that has 2 parcels currently zoned commercial, that was a recent request that was approved in 2021. At that time, the Board of County Commissioners felt that the intersection and the location of the subject property in proximity to the City of Spirit Lake was necessary and warranted because of the progression in commercial development within the city towards the south end of the city limits into Kootenai County. I'd like to, before I get into the agency comments, I'd like to submit into the record a new document that we received correspondence with the city of Spirit Lake. This came in on January 30th after the deadline for public and agency comments submittal.
Read into the record as HE 1001. Thank you.
And basically what it states, the original comment that was submitted by the city of Spirit Lake basically stated that they have no objection to the request. In a subsequent email on January 30th, they stated that they currently have a moratorium on water and sewer connection, which would preclude the subject property from being annexed if the applicant chose to go that route. Health Department basically stated that future development must comply with the wastewater discharge limitations over the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer. Just to remind the public that the Panhandle Health, as well as Kootenai County Land Use Development and Development Code, has limitations of 1 dwelling per 5 acres with a maximum domestic wastewater discharge of 250 gallons per day. Spirit Lake Fire approved the request. ITD had stated that they have issued an approach permit to the applicant off of Highway 41 with specific sideboards for future limitations on the use of that approach. We did solicit comments from Lakes Highway District because the property abuts Wendland Loop on the south end. The Highway District basically stated that they wouldn't provide a formal request until the review fees have been paid. And since then, we have not received any response from them. We felt that the response from Idaho Transportation Department was valid for us to move forward with a zone change simply because no specific use of the site is being proposed at this time to review potential impacts in terms of traffic, trip analysis and trip distribution analysis and so forth. So we didn't feel that it was imperative for us to put the project on hold. We could move forward with the application. During the public comment period, we received 4 comments in opposition of the request with concerns of additional traffic, compatibility with the surrounding low-density residential development west of Highway 41 and south of the subject property. There were also concerns that the potential groundwater could be contaminated with the future commercial development on site, although I did already state that there are limitations from Panhandle Health District as well as in our code as to the amount of wastewater that can be discharged daily on any given parcel over the aquifer. So before I get into the specifics of staff analysis, I'd like to read into the record section of our code that deals with split zone parcels of land. Pursuant to Kootenai County Land Use and Development Code Title 8, Section 81303, Rules and Interpretations, Item 1, if a zone boundary line divides a parcel, the director may permit the entire parcel to be included in one of the zones that then apply to that parcel so that only one zone and its associated regulations will apply to that parcel. What that means is that it gives the director, whether it's Director Callahan or anyone in his position in the future, the ability to make an interpretational call as to how they would approve land use development permits or building permits with the split zone parcel of land. We believe that the primary purpose of tonight's hearing is to assess the proposed zone change from restricted residential and commercial to fully commercial, is to provide for a more transparent review of the potential impacts over the entire parcel through a public hearing process where the project comes before the hearing examiner as well as the Board of County Commissioners, rather than an administrative decision at the discretion of Director Callahan or a different individual at a future date. So this would basically give more of a clear understanding if the property is rezoned to commercial, what could potentially be on that site. Should the zone change be approved, there will be another safeguard for the county and jurisdictional agencies to review future development, because according to Article 2.6 in the commercial zone, where a property abuts a federal or state highway, it requires a special notice permit. That is to assess traffic impacts and compatibility concerns that may arise.
So just to interject it right there, so, because I wanted to ask you to expound a little bit on the special notice permit process for the record. So that would be where maybe a deeper dive into the transportation impacts would occur?
That is correct. Additionally, I'd like to state that given the current zoning of the property, if the applicant were to develop on the north end of the property today, or if they were to request for Director Callahan to make an interpretational call to use the entire parcel as commercial site without this zone change process, they would still be bound to to the special notice permit process. So I don't know if this is the right way to put it, but Director Callahan sometimes says that these types of applications are more of a housekeeping process to just clear up the record without having split zone parcels. And lastly, we find that this zone change is unlikely to have any additional impacts simply because of the limitations on wastewater discharge. There are some uses that don't require wastewater discharge. For instance, such as a mini storage or rental warehouse where it could be developed over the entire parcel versus today just on the northern end without an office and restroom facilities that could potentially be intensifying the use of the site. But the special notice permit would address those impacts for the need to have any traffic calming devices or improvements on the highway in terms of like acceleration, deceleration lanes, turning lanes, and so forth. As it comes to the comprehensive plan analysis, being that it's in the border designation, it allows for very limited development that ensures future city expansion can be accomplished in an effective, orderly manner. We find that this request really falls within the guidelines of the comp plan because it's self-limiting. It's over the aquifer. The second one is that the until annexation has occurred and the city services can be provided, the area are generally not expected to be intensely developed. Well, that's the case because once again, they're self-limiting. And moreover, due to an existing moratorium, annexation is not a possibility. So the city has expressed no desire to annex this property because they can't provide the services like they would within the city limits. Given those conditions, we find that the request meets the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. It is more or less, like I said, a housekeeping item, and it allows for an incremental progression of commercial development where one is expected, especially at an intersection of two state highways. With that, I stand for any questions at this time.
I do have a couple, but Mr. Callahan, did you want to say something?
Yes, sir. Going back to the provision that allows the director discretion to say that this could be all commercial. To me, that first of all, that's a common code provision you'll find around the country. I bet you've seen it somewhere else. But in my experience, it's meant for situations that are actually the opposite of this, where most of the property is commercial and there's a small sliver that's some other zoning district. And it makes sense to allow the person at the top to have some discretion for these things. In a case like this, though, it's pretty clear that this is tantamount to a rezoning. And so that's what, in my view, Vlad meant when he said transparent, that it's just better planning practice for the community to see that we're not willy-nilly changing the zoning because we can.
Understood. Thanks. Yeah, so I guess I just want to expand a little bit on the utilities. One of the approval criteria is access to public infrastructure, or how to put it, or will reasonably be expected to in the near future. So I understand the limitations that are going to come with the septic, which would be a very low amount given it's equivalent to one household. How would water work for the property? And I have a follow-up question that too for one of your commercial code provisions, but just say in general, they want to just dig a well, and how would that work?
Well, the property was recently subdivided. I don't remember I think it's called Dolan's Deal First Edition. And I believe they're doing individual, or they were approved to have individual wells. There is a provision in the Land Use and Development Code that states any parcel within 1,000 feet of a municipality where water can be provided shall connect. What that means, it doesn't outright say that, but what that implies is that annexation is a must. Clearly, with the moratorium, the city does not have that capability right now to serve this project. In essence, one could argue that they could be held, hostage by the city if they're not allowed to develop the site to best potential economic use. One of the things that we explored at staff to argue for the need to rezone this, aside from everything else, is its location. I'm sure when you drove out there, you looked to see that there's a lot of noise from the two highways, and it just doesn't lend itself to being a residential site. Of course, the parcels that are further east, they are, further away from the highway. Therefore, they're not as directly impacted. But that's one of the other reasons that we felt that this rezone was warranted.
Okay, yeah, and I was going to follow up on that provision with the 1,000 feet rule, because I've never seen that one specifically applied. But just in kind of looking around at the GIS map, there's a parcel right across the street that's owned by the water district for the neighborhood. So I just was wondering if that was analyzed, or how that, maybe it's not used for that, or I don't know how that rule would be applied to that specific situation. Perhaps the applicant will be able to comment on that too.
Yeah,
I just want to know if you
could.
knew any more of the particulars.
I don't know if it's a
Starts
private water system or not, but the provision that you're referring to, the 1,000 feet, it implies a municipal water system.
Okay.
And so I would tend to think it would be the city of Spirit Lake. We have had other projects where the cities have come out and requested that we apply that section of the code, basically forcing them to go through the annexation route and have the property be reviewed through the city versus the county. But tonight's request is not that.
Okay, yeah, because, I'm just looking ahead again with that approval criteria, because the commercial standards, it says existing community water system, which is kind of was a little bit of a head scratcher for me about exactly what that meant, I guess. I would assume that meant municipal, but I guess I didn't know for sure whether that meant, if that's and how they get classified as public or private water systems. So I don't know if Dave or the applicant will be able to chime in on this.
I don't know that we can force somebody to connect to a private water system. Unfortunately, I'm not prepared. I wish I had the order of decision for the underlying subdivision and what was discussed in terms of water provision. We could look at the plat, but maybe the applicant could elaborate on that. I unfortunately didn't dig deep enough to see what the underlying subdivision had.
Okay.
Or if you
requested.
want, we can take a 5-minute recess and pull it up and come back and report to you.
If that's still necessary by the end of the hearing, perhaps. But I'll keep us moving for now. I don't want to take us too far in the weeds.
Okay.
Just trying to be thorough. So if that's in your presentation, we'll move on to the applicant. So I'm sure they've gotten some hints about some things I am curious on.
Good evening, Mr. Granrath. I'm Jeremy Terzulli. I'm a land use consultant working on behalf of Mr. Wendland this evening. I work with a few different firms in town. Olson Engineering is the engineer of record on this one. I reside in Hauser, Idaho. Olson Engineering is based out of Post Falls, Idaho. I'll jump into my presentation after I can hopefully offer some clarification on your previous question. The system across Highway 41, that is a private system. Previously, so I've been involved on this parcel of land. It was a 78-acre parent parcel many, many years ago. We worked with the Dolans. JUB was the engineer of record for quite some time doing the minor subdivision process. We had approached that water system several times. They're simply at max capacity. They can't allow any additional hookups at this point in time. I believe they even offered comment for this public hearing. And I'll get into some of the ways that we can assuage some of their concerns further in my presentation. But they don't have any additional capacity at this time to allow anybody else to hook up to their water system. And as Vlad pointed out, City of Spirit Lake, I've been involved on a lot of the projects in that area. They currently have a moratorium on due to water and sewer. Well Site 6 is supposed to come online in calendar year 2024, which would allow for mainline extensions to continue. However, they still do have the moratorium based on sewer capacity. And last time I checked with their city engineer, that is anywhere from 18 to 36 months out. So they're aware of this process. We work with them often. And then hopefully through my presentation, which I'm going to try to be brief because, you know, county staff always does a very comprehensive dive into these things. It's very, they steal a lot of my thunder, let's say, as we move through. So I'm going to try to clean up the redundancies and then we'll go from there. Okay, so that's a giant word salad that is right in front of you, and that is all of our 11 review criteria. What I'm gonna do is in subsequent slides, I kind of hopscotch around here because I feel like a lot of these sort of cluster together and give a general theme of what they're trying to do. And again, I felt that the staff review as well as our application and the attached narrative to that sort of outline this pretty clearly. So I felt like 1, 2, 3, 8, and 9, they sort of cluster together and give us a general sense that is this proposal consistent with the future land use map? Is it consistent with the current zoning in the surrounding area as well as what we could anticipate the future zoning in the area would be? And those types of things. A general suitability, is this request for commercial zoning appropriate on this parcel? And due to the staff report and the application, its proximity, it's physically abutting a highway on highway intersection, and sound land use planning says these high traffic, high intensity collectors, highways, they're appropriate for industrial and commercial zoning. We're adjacent to county commercial. That would be across Highway 41, as the Board of County Commissioners a few years ago felt that that was a prudent rezone there as well. We're adjacent to the City of Spirit Lake and their commercial uses to the north, and that little triangular piece due north of the little cutout of this piece as well. And that, like I said, that 78-acre parent parcel, Vlad's research all the way back to why this was sort of split zoned, it was a much larger parcel that sort of got bisected. There wasn't any parcel lines at that point in time to sort of trace. So we feel it's a prudent request for rezone at this location on this parcel. 4 and 5, those also cluster together and talk about infrastructure. And when we talk about infrastructure, it's roads, sewer, water, gas, electricity, all of those types of things. As I pointed out earlier, across the highway, that is a private system that handles just a few dozen residences along Watkins. They don't have any additional capacity. So that's really not in play here. Adjacent to city limits, we do believe that this property will be annexed into the city of Spirit Lake at some point in the future. It's just not now. There's gas, there's data, there's electricity all around this property. The Dolan's Deal First Edition, which was the underlying plat on this parcel, we did identify that water would be sourced through individual wells, and that was all approved and outlined in that previous request. Any sanitary sewer will have to be addressed through an individual septic system, and I get into that a little bit further on. That does offer sort of those guardrails, the backstops as to what type of development could happen here. My position as a consultant on behalf of the applicant, it's really not appropriate for me to talk about what his final intended use is on the property. Michael is here tonight. I think he's willing to kind of share with us what his overall vision for the property is, but nobody's trying to hide the ball on this thing. There are an awful lot of stopgaps in place to sort of control what's going to happen here until it is available for annexation, at which point it could be developed as a more higher intense commercial use. Number 7, this is sort of the outlier in these review criteria. Vlad alluded to it, and I'm going to expand on that a little bit. Based on its position on that highway and highway intersection with the traffic counts, with the noise, with that big sweeping curve as you'll be decelerating into town, a residential project on this particular parcel would be devalued due to a lack of privacy, due to the highway noise, and due to the high traffic counts at that intersection and just sort of the odd shape of the parcel. So we do think that those limit its ability to be developed in the residential zoning designation. A custom home on there would likely not be as profitable as some of the additional 5-acre pieces further east of the highway. So 6, 10, and 11. So these were the ones that I highlighted to sort of wrap up my presentation with, because these also seem to be some of the concerns of the people that wrote in opposition of this proposal. And they tend to focus on health, safety, traffic concerns, and any adverse effect on neighboring properties. I want to note that Mr. Wendland, he did build Wendland Way, oddly enough, and complete the 5-acre subdivision in there. He worked with a buyer and a custom home builder for those 5-acre sites, and that individual is in support of this proposal, and that the opposition comes from property owners across the highway. So I thought that that was prudent. And then with regard to health and safety and those additional concerns, the county code for commercial zoning is going to require a screening buffer along the highway. That's in their code. The property boundary that abuts a residential zoning will also be subject to landscape buffering requirements. And in these situations, as experienced in developing as I am, typically the developer will remove some of the topsoil from the site and create an elevated berm along those property lines. Typically, they'll vegetate that, so that offers a another level of visual and noise screening. Additionally, we're anticipating an incredibly low intense commercial use based on all of those additional requirements that are gonna come here. So, and I think Michael's gonna expand on this a little bit, but you're likely to see a commercial use in here that is daylight hours operations, and would actually be a very cohesive user to the adjacent residential. Vlad alluded to this as well, but Panhandle Health District, with the ability to not hook up to city sewer until annexed, will be limited to that 90,000 gallons of effluent per year. That's the 250 per day, which in the read of the Panhandle Health District guidelines on septic, that typically puts you into that commercial use of a 20 to 25 employees type of a thing. It really does limit the end user on a commercial project. It's hard to get a speculative user in there because we do have to comport with those guidelines from Panhandle Health District. The site development will be held to the commercial site development plan review of the county, which is going to include circulation and parking areas to be paved, to be designed by a licensed engineer, pre-treat all of the stormwater, meaning any of the stormwater that is going to be created from these circulation and drive aisles. They'll have to go into grassy swales and into injection wells to ensure that any water that goes back into the aquifer has been pre-treated and is given a clean bill of health. Additionally, a trip generation letter is likely going to be required if we move to the next phase of development. And that is due to the fact that we have the special notice permit and the site plan review. And that special notice permit, I know you asked that question, these are the requirements of the special notice permit. So city staff, once we submit a site plan, will prepare a document. They will send out for agency as well as adjacent property owner the proposed use at that point in time. If there's going to be any adverse traffic impacts, they'll have the ability to require a trip generation letter. If they feel that that's still insufficient, they could actually move that to a full traffic impact analysis. But again, based on the additional guardrails we have here with effluent and just the restrictions on the site, we're likely to fall under any threshold to rise to the level of needing a full traffic impact analysis. But that's going to be the community development director's call. He'll analyze everything that we've proposed. All of the agencies will be re-notified now that we're actually saying this is exactly what we're going to do here, and they'll be allowed to comment another time and say, okay, based on this specific use on this specific property, these would be our requirements. So that's another level of, again, like I said, a guardrail to see where we'll wind up with that. And then in summation, we are on a highway-on-highway intersection. We've got that split zoning. We're adjacent to a couple of commercial uses as well as a commercially zoned property that I'm quite certain has already had a project review on, and there is a development plan for that commercial site. The agencies were all notified and were not in opposition. They remained neutral or in support. We do have that approved ITD encroachment permit. We're going to work with ITD and the highway district to see what is the most appropriate access once we actually identify the use that we're going to put on here. And additional reviews and approvals will be required through that special notice permit as well as the site plan review. And so everybody will get a full view of what's going on here when we move to that next level. And with that, you have any questions?
I guess just one quick one. Thanks for a thorough explanation, answering questions I would have posed. But just real quick on the ITD encroachment permit. So that's guess maybe just expand on that a little more for the record. What level is the permit at now? Basically, it's just an agreement that ITD is going to let you have access from the highway.
No, it's actually a bit more specific than that. So ITD, in concert with the transportation engineers, they determine based on proximity to city limits, speed limit, intersection spacing, where they can allow accesses along a state highway. And I believe, I'm going off of memory here, I want to say it's 660 feet from that intersection, no closer. Now, that part is the generic encroachment. Now, if we were to propose a five-story hotel here that was going to generate 300 trips during 8 to 10 in the morning, there's going to be some additional restrictions to that. Right in, right out only, or not for that use at all. So yeah, they gave us a location of where we could access the property, and it is contingent upon approval of the final use through that special notice permit process. They're not saying, yep, you can build it here and you can dump as many cars as you want to out onto this highway. There's another level that we got to go through, but it has been geographically located.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Okay.
And if Mr. Wendland would like to speak, come on up.
For the record, Michael Wendland, resident in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Good evening, Mr. Examiner. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm obviously the property owner of the subject parcel here. I am a local North Idahoan. I own and operate a small real estate construction company, very small scale. As they've said in the past, I purchased all the parcels you can see there from the Dolan family a couple years ago. We built the road, highway spec road, county spec road. Lakes Highway took the road over, gave me a pat on the back, said it was one of the best roads that they'd seen built in the north part of the county. We worked very closely with them to specifically design that road because of the elevation and terrain there. Per code and requirement, I could have built a private road and could have made it very ugly and not very pretty, and I didn't do that. I put over $300,000 into that road, and we made a exceptional road to enter the parcels there. As I mentioned, I purchased it. The Dolans started the development process for this particular piece a couple years ago. I purchased the project for them. They were in the early stages of this. And as we built the road and the infrastructure development over the last couple of years or a year, I learned a little bit about Phil Dolan and kind of his vision and what he wanted with the city of Spirit Lake and his properties. Obviously, the Dolans and the Oswards donated a lot of land to the school and the city around the area. And Phil's, from what I learned, Phil's grand plan was to have an entrance to the city, and I think he was planning on using some of this parcel to that. And it's kind of interesting because we go through this process here, and of course, the special notice permit is really what jurisdicts what happens to the property. This is a simple rezone that you have to do prior to that to even see if your use or your zoning's proper. So I actually plan on kind of doing what Phil wanted to do. I hopefully can get an American flag and an Idaho flag on the corner there, along with the help of ITD. We will have to beautify the area along the highway there. Part of the county requirements for commercial zoning and using the property in that aspect. So eventually in the long term, maybe I'd like to, put my own office there, maybe a small shop and maybe a landscape or nursery yard, something very small scale. Again, I plan on keeping the land for myself. I'm not a large scale developer, so everything takes time for me. The public comment did mention some things that had to do with the safety of the road. I already explained to you, we went above and beyond when we built the road and to the entrance to the development there. Pollution on the aquifer, of course we work as not only a contractor, but we would have to here as well, work directly with Panhandle Health, IDWR, the county specifically. I would never let the aquifer be polluted. It's the same water I would be drinking out of. So, Again, as it's been mentioned multiple times, I do think commercial zoning is the highest and best use for this parcel. We are surrounded by commercial on the north, the northwest, and even the triangular parcel to the northeast there. I do feel that that would be the highest and best use as we, for this parcel. The value, everyone, you know, when we talk about rezone, and of course being a real estate guy, everyone always asks about the value of their real estate. Currently, we have garbage that we don't have garbage. There's garbage littered along Highway 41 that we clean up about once a week. There are fallen down trees. We've worked closely with ITD to remove, as we did this project, through their right-of-way to help them improve the right-of-way. If there was some minor clearing, I think it would be a benefit to the public. The animal crossing here is fairly heavy, and I think removing any shrubbery or bushes where the public can get a better line of sight of any animals coming on the road would help increase safety on this corridor. The beautification requirement, and as Jeremy and part of the county code relays, anytime you're to develop commercial property, depending again on the use, which would be part of the special notice permit, you do have to beautify or provide screening, obviously depending on what the use is. You know, I mean, I think my name's on that road and it's my property. Would plan to beautify the entire, I don't know, it's almost 2,000 feet of frontage there, making it better, making the entrance to our development better, and making it a nicer area. So in my opinion, that would not decrease values. If anything, that would make things a little bit better. Mr. Examiner, I know we've met all agency requirements. Just for the record, Lakes Highway did approve. It was, I think, after their comment time frame. It is in IMS right now, so they did say that they don't have any problem with that. I think we have met all other agency requirements, and facts of the finding, I hope you can see to recommend approval. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Nope, thank you for your presentation and that information. It is helpful for a nice, complete record. And if any of the interested parties want to come back and hear what you had to say about your plans for the property, I know it's not required, but I know I appreciate hearing that at the very least. So, Mr. Callahan, is there anyone on Zoom who wishes to comment? All right, with that, it is 6:43. I'm going to close the public hearing for Zone 23-0004 at 6:43.